Hey everyone, how are you doing today? It's Nigerian XJW Speaks here again. Hope everyone is doing well and staying sort of sane as much as is possible. It's been a lot changing here. So here in the UK, just today, it was just announced that schools are closing. Not that you asked for that information, but I am sharing it anyway. Hope you are keeping well. So all this talk about health over the course of this week has got me thinking about something that I've wanted to talk about anyway. It's another one of those topics that for those of us that have left, it's sort of a sticking point. And for me, it's personally just one more reason why I would never consider going back. You've just seen from the title, which I haven't decided yet what it's going to be as at the point of filming this. It is the blood policy, their stance on blood transfusion. As someone who has a child, the thought of potentially letting him die to placate, to do the will of an ancient book or some interpretation of an ancient book, or the whim of some men, it makes me shudder to think that that is potentially the position I could have been at if I didn't wake up. So if you are someone who either has just left or is questioning, I have some things that I wanted to just share for you to think about. If you are someone who still perhaps believes that they are God's true organization, religion, whatever you want to call it, just some things for you to think about. Because to be honest with you, these are things that I didn't know myself until I left. That there was all of this information out there. Give me a moment. Right, I'm back on. Had a tickle in my throat there. Okay. So I didn't realize that there had been a lot of flip-flopping over the years in terms of their position. And it's just mind-boggling. And for me, I'm thinking if there is an unchanging and always all-wise God who is behind these policies, behind these positions, why is it changing so much? And what do you tell the people that have lost family members as at the time when you had a different position and that's now changed? How do you explain that? So I'm actually going to go far back as the position on organ transplant as well, which if you didn't know, that was something they were against. I made some notes because there's just so many dates that I'm trying to make sure I capture everything. So the earliest date I have here is from 1929, the May 1st article of the Golden Age, which I believe is what they used to call the Awake magazine. In that article, transfusion, donating blood, everything is A-okay. Free to do it, nothing wrong with that. Fast forward to up until 1945, actually. So we have the article of December 25th of 1940, and that was the Consolation magazine there as well. Transfusion, absolutely fine. In the Dutch article of September 1945, also the Consolation, I believe this is on page 16. That one clearly says that if you die from refusing a blood transfusion, that does not bear a good witness to Jehovah, and that God has never prohibited this. That is what they have on there. That was their position. And then we get around to, let me see, in 1959, so this is the October 15th article of 1959, we start hearing talk about blood transfusion, blood and all fractions were a violation. That was when that sort of came into play. So the whole thing, blood, fractions, violation. You could still do it, but at that point, it wasn't a disfellowshipping offense. And if you have stumbled upon this and you don't know what I mean by disfellowshipping offense, I have a video that I will try and put a card to up here so you can watch that. I believe it's my last one. No, it's not my last one. The one before last, about shunning, which is the part of what happens when you get disfellowshipped. But in 1961, accepting a blood transfusion became something you could be disfellowshipped for. And some bizarre reasoning, some bizarre comment that they had on there. Essentially, it appeared some sort of thought that within a person's blood was their habits, their personality. Absolutely crazy when you think about it. And thinking that if you accept a blood transfusion from someone who had less than desirable habits, somehow you would absorb those personality traits were going to get transferred to you. I don't know, I can't say how do I put this. Obviously there's some sort of mixtures going on, but I don't think you're going to become a murderer just because you get a blood that was transfused from a murderer. But that was part of what they were trying to say in there, and in the 1961 article. And then we move forward. Let me see. We move forward to it's very bizarre. There's a lot of bizarre things. We move forward to 1994, which I think one of the most disgusting articles they've ever put out. This is the May 22 Awake of 1994, and they had a selection of young people who were not yet adults, who had been martyred for this religion because they preferred to die than accept a blood transfusion. And that article was celebrating that. Absolutely sick, really, and proudly saying that there are thousands of young people who have remembered their creator, their creator in the days of their youth, and just names after names after names. Absolutely disgusting. So then we start looking at some really nasty stuff there. In my own lifetime, so in the time that I have recollection of being a witness, I have noticed change as well. So in around 2000, which I can clearly remember, accepting of blood fractions became a matter of conscience rather than being a violation, which it was in 1959. It became a matter of conscience. So, and then in 2004, basically, I have, if you go on jwfacts.com and search for this, there's a table on there where they basically show if you fractionate all of the components enough, right from the whole blood, basically you can pretty much have the whole thing as long as you're having it in fractions. Can you tell me what is the difference between having the whole blood itself versus having it broken into little bits? Does that not look man-made to you? That just screams man-made. Never mind the flip-flopping. What is the point of, you can't have the whole thing in one, but you can have it if it's broken into parts? So that was just in 2004, that sort of changes happened. And like I said, that is a change that I have seen in my own lifetime. And I'm thinking, what about people who have died before you had your policy change due to listening to you? Although my notes have gone off. How do you explain to their family members why they've lost their children, their partners, their parents, refusing a blood transfusion, something you have no place. You absolutely have no place inserting yourself into this sort of medical treatment that people should be taking. You have absolutely no right to be doing that. Absolutely have blood on their hands. And the fact that they're celebrating it. I mean, that article that I talked about from 1994, so May 22, there was also recently in the 2016 convention, so Remain Loyal to Jehovah convention, Anthony Morris III, who is one of the members of the governing body, giving a talk. Now, hold on. Tickle in my throat again. Anthony Morris III, one of the governing body members, giving a talk and essentially praising a child who was called Joshua Walker, who had martyred himself, who had basically lost his life because he refused to accept a transfusion. And apparently the doctors who were coming to basically lay it all out for him, telling him, listen, mate, like, you are going to die if you don't do this, which he did die, referring to that as persecution. The doctor was persecuting him for trying to provide medical care to save his life. And the most bizarre thing, after Anthony Morris finishes the story, calls him an amazing young fellow, the audience applauded. They did. Which, now on the outside, looking at that, they are applauding the death of a child. How much mind control has to go into that? That is a whole other thing, but that was something that really stood out to me as I was watching that again in preparation for talking about this today. It's absolutely sick. And then the one that they talked about more recently, it's in one of the JW broadcasting episodes. If I can find which one it is, I will put it in the comments below. But there's this couple that had come on to talk about their son that again had basically been martyred, sacrificed for this organization, Gerald Scepter. He died in June of 1992. He was anywhere between 11 and 12. The whole interview segment that the parents were doing, it seemed to be heavily focused on how the organization was great to them, how the people in the congregation brought them food, stayed with them, which is a nice thing to do if you have, a family member or friend, in such a difficult position. Not much talk about the son. Not much. It's very bizarre. It's very bizarre to be rewarded with a place on an interview like that, because being called on to be interviewed on JW Broadcasting, that's probably as high as a privilege as you can get as a Jehovah's Witness, because that's going to be broadcast all over the world. To be rewarded for letting your son die, absolutely bizarre. So I keep having to stop because I've got this tickle in my throat and I haven't got any water here to actually drink some. So I'm going to wrap up soon so I can go get some water. Okay. So that couple, what we have a culture of celebrating children being sacrificed, their lives being cut short and sacrificed to please the interpretation of some out of touch old men of an ancient book. I cannot imagine doing such a thing. I know at the start I mentioned organ transplant as well, which is another thing that they've had their position change on that so many times. It's a lot briefer. So back in the November 15 Watchtower of 1967, 1967, they referred to having an organ transplant as being equivalent to cannibalism, that it was like cannibalism. So between then until the 1980s, precisely in the August 22 awake of 1989, where their position changed and they were praising it as something that was helpful, how many people died within that frame of time before their position changed, and now it was fine to do? What changed? Did your God change? It's if you're someone who is still believing that they might be correct, what is changing? Is it your God that's changing? Is it them that's not listening properly? Are those the people you want to put your lives in their hands? You know, like I said, the thought of having my son, you know, not get the treatment that he needs because I'm trying to please the rules of some men, just unthinkable completely. So I think those were the articles that I pulled together and the things that I was looking at. The other people as well that would be impacted by stuff like that, I'm sure there are people who have been disfellowshipped for their decision to live, like to have a life, to not die, people that their families would have shunned for this, and then the policy changes. Do they get the time back that they've lost with their family? There are some families that probably won't make peace with them even after the policy changes, because once you're out and you see things for what they are, well, you don't want to go back. Again, I'll put the link to my Shanine video on the top of the screen as I'm talking about this. But yeah, that's what I wanted to cover today. Just something for you to think about. Literally, blood on their hands. I dread to think over the course of, you know, the 1940s, when they started to change things, how many lives have been lost because of this policy. This is, like I said at the start, one more reason why I can absolutely not imagine going back to this. I'm gonna leave it there. That was a bit of a heavy finish and a tickle in my throat as well. I would love to hear your comments. I would love to hear what you think about this. I know a lot of you on here that have already left. If you have any experience with this, share it as well, so people that are looking can come on and read that as well. It's not something that I have personal experience with, thank goodness. It would just be one more thing that this organization would have, you know, taken from me or impacted me on. But I would love to hear your thoughts. Continue to comment and subscribe and share it if you think is someone that would be helpful to know it, because I don't know how many people out there know what policies this organization have. I was talking with a friend of mine. Excuse me. Okay, we're back and we'll stop coughing. I was talking with a friend of mine over the weekend, who is someone that is quite familiar with this Bible, and she knows that I make these, and I was saying I am thinking about making this, and she was very surprised, very shocked that this was a policy that the witnesses had. So I don't know how many people know that this is something that's happening, and people are losing their lives, that have lost their lives. Maybe not so much now as they're getting more and more lenient, but this is something that is happening. They still cannot accept blood. I was so thrilled to chop up my no blood directive card when I eventually woke up. That was a good moment to chop that up and make sure that my records were corrected with the GPs. If I need help, I'll take all the help that I can get. I'm not going to listen to some people who have no business telling me what sort of medical care I should get, be involved in that, and most certainly not for my son who has his whole life ahead of him. And it's absolutely feel sorry for people that have lost family members, children, siblings, partners to this awful policy. Okay, I'm gonna leave it there for real this time. Have a good rest of the week. Stay safe. If I keep coughing, I might have to self-isolate at this point, but that literally just came on in the course of making this video. I'll see you on the next one. If you don't see me next week, that's what's happened. Okay, take care now. Bye bye.